Hello guys, welcome to the week number 4 of our class. I hope you have been doing well. Difficult time for everybody these days, I know, but well, I send you my best of energies for you to have face this in the best way possible. I am recording this video from the permanent assembly, right? Like right now we have subclasses. Nevertheless, if my calculations are okay, I think that you will be watching this video when a situation has already been normalized somehow and you are able to take classes one more time. So as usual, I would like to share with you a poem. This time, this is a poem by Cesar Vallejo, who is a Latin American poet, and that I find quite interesting for some reasons I'll briefly share with you in a moment. So this is called El poeta a su amada. Amada, en esta noche tú te has sacrificado sobre los maderos curvados de mi beso. Y tu pena me ha dicho que Jesús ha llorado y que hay un Viernes Santo más dulce que ese beso. En esta noche rara que tanto me has mirado, la muerte ha estado alegre y ha cantado en su hueso. En esta noche de septiembre se ha oficiado mi segunda caída y el más humano beso. Amada, moriremos los dos juntos, muy juntos. Se irá secando a pausas nuestra excelsa amargura y habrá tocado a sombra nuestros labios difuntos. Y ya no habrá reproches en tus ojos benditos, ni volveré a ofenderte, y en una sepultura los dos nos dormiremos, como dos hermanitos. So I really like it for a couple of reasons. First of all, with some of the informal language that he uses, as you will see, he uses this term of Viernes Santo, like a single word, right? A very rural slang, we can call it that way. Or the word septiembre, for example, yes, instead of the most formal septiembre. Nevertheless, I think that one of the most important things over here is, in my perspective at least, is how Cesar Vallejo is usually a poet that handles some dark topics, gloomy, depressive, not necessarily joyful, right? And he is pessimistic in different ways. He was depressed all the time, right? So I find this poem particularly interesting because even using those same elements like death and bones and even certain religious reference such as the Good Friday or Jesus, he manages to create a poem that is a little bit hopeful, right? That transmits love, that transmits care for somebody else, and at least a wishful thinking of being with that person. Now, the end of the poem, for some reason, may seem like a suicidal pact or something similar, but that's not the case, or at least that's not how I understand it, right? I conceive that as the possibility of loving somebody until the day of the mutual death, or somebody else's death, which is some sort of commitment that is admirable somehow. And also, the final part has to do, in my opinion, with the fact of death making us all equal, right? No matter all those things that separate us in life, such as money, social differences, religion, beauty, distance, right? Like we are all equal when we die. Yes, like this death that is going to come to us all at some point will make us brothers and sisters somehow. Like it eliminates the differences that life somehow promotes, right? So it's not really an invitation to death or suicide or something like that. No, it's really like a reflection upon some of the conditions that death will bring. So, well, anyway, hopefully you are encouraged to read a little bit more about Vallejo or any of the other poets that I have presented over here. Well, guys, so let's get down to business. We're going to be working then, or starting this week with the narrative paragraphs. Remember that we have already covered the essential characteristics of general paragraphs, and then we have also practiced a lot with the descriptive paragraphs. Yes, both physical and emotional or intangible uh, descriptions, right? So as I mentioned before, we're going to be working or start working today with the narrative paragraphs. Okay, so well, hopefully when I see you guys in formas discursivas, I hope to see you over there. It would be a pleasure and a privilege for me. In that subject, we sort of have some of the same topics that we're having in composition, but we go way deeper and way more detail in here. So let's say that for the purpose of this subject, we are going to define narrative sequences as telling stories. Just that, right? So you could simply in a very let's say oversimplification, uh, mention that a narration is just telling a story, right? And a story can be something as traditional as a fable, as Snow White, or Little Red Riding Hood, or Hansel and Gretel. Yes, it could be that, or it could be a big novel like the ones of Garcia Marquez, or it can be a play like the ones from Shakespeare, or it can be a short tale like the ones from Julio Cortázar. Any of those, right? Because basically, even though they have different levels of detail and mastery, the essential idea is the same, like telling a story. But then again, a narrative text, or a narrative, in this case paragraph, can also be about what you had for breakfast this morning, or what happened to you yesterday, or telling somebody else the story of how this pandemic started, or anything else, right? So it doesn't necessarily to be a highly appreciated or famous literary text. Basically, you can tell the story of the conversation you had with your mom, and that was it, right? That's it. Not really very complicated. Telling a story is simple enough. You can do it usually in past, or you can do it in present, or even you can make some predictions about the future, and that will be still telling a story. Okay. So if you can be so kind and go to the slide number 26, you will be able to see something that is quite important over here, and that it's called the internal structure of narrative sequence, right? This was proposed by Adam on the 92, and essentially we will be discussing 5 components that sort of make a description, make a text or a paragraph to be able to be classified as a narrative text or a narrative paragraph. So, in order for something to be considered narrative, it requires to have these 5 components. Okay, so I'm going to explain one by one. It's important that you get familiar with the technical names that we have over here, and that you especially understand like what are the connotations of each one. Yes, for example, the second one can be a little bit tricky on the name because it has to do with something completely different. So emphasize, guys, or concentrate on this somehow use or definition of each one. So let's go with the first one, that is, you can see over there, it is called temporality. So for a story to be considered a story, for a story to be considered narrative, it requires to have a temporality. It means a time in which a sequence of events happens. Yes, so the time in which the narrative progresses. Now, this can be somehow an exact date. So some stories can tell you exactly when they happen, like the hour, the date, the year. Yes, Somehow can tell you about the season. It was in winter, it was in summer. Um, they can tell you the time of the day, in the morning, at night, well, something like that. So that is the temporality, right? Also take into account that stories, if they are long, so probably they have different temporalities, right? Uh, the first part of the first chapter happens during the childhood of the protagonist, and then the rest of the book is when he's already an adult, or well, all these different things. So temporality has to do with time meaning hour, date, year, season, or something like that. Yes. Sometimes, as I mentioned, the temporality is somehow explicit. Yes, they tell you exactly the date, and sometimes you have to guess it. So let's try to find like all the components with a single story that everybody knows in here. Okay, so think about Little Red Riding Hood, Caperucita Roja. That is the let's say the traditional tale that everybody knows about. So what is the temporality of Little Red Riding Hood? Well, they never mention that. They never tell us like the year or something like that. But can we guess it? Sure, of course. Like, I mean, there's a moment in which there doesn't seem to be a lot of technology. There are professions such as the woodcutter or the woodsman. This lady has to go for to walk for a long time in order to arrive to another house. So it's very safely believed. It's very safely to believe to that this could happen around the Middle Ages, right? Like more or less in the same. I mean, if we locate all these fairy tales, such as again Snow White or Cinderella, and they talk about princess and queens and kings. Well, maybe like this happens during the Middle Age, right? We can also say that this may happen, Little Red Riding Hood, I mean, during a day. Yes, maybe in the morning, in the afternoon, something like that. And, well, they don't mention snow or anything like that, so probably it's like, either summer or autumn or something like that, right? So this is an example only for you to see that even though when they don't give you a temporality specifically or explicitly, it's possible to guess it somehow by using the context of the story. Now, as you can see, inside the parentheses there are a couple of additional terms, right? So let's deal with the linear or non-linear, right? Now, what is a linear narrative? A linear narrative basically has the most traditional structure that we know, that we were taught in school, and that normally all the commercial movies, books, TV series follow, right? And what is that? Well, the story starts in one point, at some point in the past, and it advances until the end. That's it. Yes? So, for example, Little Red Riding Hood is definitely a linear story. It starts with the girl receiving these pancakes or food or whatever for her grandma, and then, going through the through the forest, and everything happened until that in the end, she's rescued and the wolf is killed. So it's linear, right? It's there's no interruption, and it goes from the past until the present. And most of the stories that we normally know are linear. Now, what does it mean, non-linear? It means that there are some sort of jumps or skips in the narrative, right? What does it mean? That we are, for example, with a character in the present when he is an adult, let's say, but then eventually that character remembers certain things of when he was a child, and then they start telling us the story of when the character was a kid, right? Or it may happen that the character has like a premonition or a feeling of something that will happen, and then the story jumps into the future, right? Sometimes it may happen that we start a story and the first that they tell us is that somebody died, yes, and then for the rest of the story they start telling us or like revealing certain details that let us know who was the person who died, who killed him, or something like that. Yes, so the temporality is mixed. It doesn't go from past, present until the end, but it jumps from times to times, right? For example, a film director that is pretty good with this may be Quentin Tarantino. If any of you like any of his movies or has watched any of those, just as an example, you see, like sometimes they give you the chapter one or the episode one, the first part of the movie, but then it is actually something that is in the present, and then eventually in the next movie they show us like what happened in the past. So there is this combination of temporalities. Yes, that is not so common. Let's say, like usually when you're reading a book, it's most likely that you find a linear story than a non-linear one, right? But well, that is also a possibility, so that is why I'm presenting it to you. And then there are a couple of additional terms in the parentheses, in the brackets, and the one that says analepsis and prolepsis, right? So basically these are fancy ways to name the phenomena that are really well known. And the first one is the flashback. So remembering something from your past. It may be an hour ago, a week ago, 10 years ago, something like that. And the prolepsis is thinking about the future. Okay, so jumping in time in the future. So it may happen when you are reading a chapter of a book, and there's the end, and the next chapter, the chapter number 2, shows you a character that has advanced in 10 years in the future or something like that. Yes, so that's a prolepsis. Somehow they don't tell you year by year until the next 10 years. No, they immediately jump into the future, right? So you'll see that for example, a movie such as Back to the Future, any of the three, could be a pretty good example of very constant, analepsis and prolepsis, flashbacks and flash forwards. Okay, very well. So hopefully that component is clear. Then we have the theme unity, and this is what I mentioned. Please don't get confused, because this theme unity seems to be like the topic, Theme sounds like tema. Well, that is not the case. We're dealing here with the characters. Who are the participants in the story? Yes? So, let's say that for the story to have, to be considered a narrative, it requires to have a minimum of one subject, one actor, or one character, right? That is the minimum that is required to be like consistent in a story. Now, what is the theme unity of Little Red Riding Hood? Well, all the characters. Just name the characters: Little Red Riding Hood, the mother, the wolf, the woodsman. Yes, the person that saves them in the end. Period. That will be the theme unity. No more. Now, it's important to see that sometimes we have characters that are animate or that they can be inanimate. Yes? So, for example, the most traditional characters are animate, yes, because they are people or they are animals, and they speak and have certain role or something like that. Yes? Now, sometimes we have characters that are inanimate because they are objects, yes? But they are personalized somehow. So think about, for example, Beauty and the Beast and all these candle bearers or clocks or tables or furniture in general that speak and have feelings and are a relevant part of the story, right? So that can be an inanimate character that is nevertheless personified. For example, in certain fairy tales, when there is a tree that is able to speak and that is able to communicate somehow, so that can be also an inanimate character. The characters can be individual or collective, right? Again, the most traditional character is individual. Yes, it's just a person or an animal or again an animate object, but that is a single being, a single person or a single individual. Now, sometimes in other kind of stories, they talk us about collective characters, right? That can be represented by a group of people. Yes. So, for example, if you watch Harry Potter's, the bad guys, they were called the Death Eaters, and even when some of them were somehow individualized and given names, as a collective, they are a character, right? A political party, for example, can be a collective character, so they all act as an individual character in a particular story. Let's say an agglomeration, a group of people, a guild, a clan, even sometimes a whole country or city, yes? So they say the Irish, the English, the American. Well, those are collective characters into a story, okay? Hopefully that's clear enough. Well, let's go into the next one. And the number 3 is really important, yes? And is transformation. It is very important that for a story to be considered as such, there is change. We need to have change from one state to another, right? It is impossible to have a narration if there is no change, if everything remains the same, right? So states are always going to change. So you go from happiness to sadness, from disgrace to joy, to poverty to richness, well, etc. And the changes can be very big, very notorious, very explicit, or they can be like really small, no? So let's go back to our story, to Little Red Riding Hood. Well, there's change from happiness of the girl, like going around and getting distracted and getting to know the wolf that apparently was a new friend, to fear, yes, when she discovers that she's going to be devoured, to relief, for example, she feels satisfied when she's rescued by the woodsman. So you see, there is change either in the emotions, that is the one that I mentioned, but there is also change in the location. For example, we change from a Little Red Riding Hood's house to the forest to the house of the grandma. Yes, and we can describe over there a lot of different change. We require at least one change to for the story to be considered a narration. Okay, so that would be for the transformation component. Now let's go to the number 4, and that is the action unity. And basically, guys, I mean, there's a description in there, right? But the action unity is all the moments in which the narration can be like separated. Yes? Remember that we're looking for a minimum of 3 moments, no? Probably as I mentioned, that you require to have minimum 1 change. So you would require a minimum of 2, no? But usually a story has 3 moments that are the beginning, the complication or the middle, and the ending, right? So those are normally the 3 moments that the story may have. Basically, you divide the story depending of how long it is. It is going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, I don't know, depending on how long it is. And also depending on how detailed you want to be. So for example, if I want to find the action unity of Little Red Riding Hood, a first moment will be the girl being in the house, a second will be the girl meeting the wolf. A third one will be the wolf confronting the kid after eating the grandma. The next one will be the wolf eating the girl, and finally the girl being rescued. You see? 5 different moments because I was very detailed. I could have minimized that to 3, for example. Yeah? But that's really up to you and how you manage to detail that. Finally, we have the causality. Yes, remember that this is different to casualidad. We're not talking about causality, but causality here. Sorry, casualty or casualty in this case. Not casualty, but causality, because it has to do with the word causalidad. Okay? And we're dealing here with cause and effect. Yes? There is a retribution or a consequence because something happened before. Right? So, why Little Red Riding Hood was in the forest? Because what is the cause? Because she was sent to give some food to her grandma. Yes. Why was Little Red Riding Hood delayed? Well, because the wolf confused her and told her to took a different road or something like that. Yes. So there must be a relation of cause and effect. Yes, cause consequence in there. Now you don't need to write the whole thing. With 2 or 3 will be okay. Yes, and that precisely takes us to the assignment number 1. Okay, so the assignment of this week is going to be quite easy. Simply, you are going to use the book that you are reading. I suppose that we're in the week number 4. Hopefully, you have read already a bunch of pages, I don't know, 30, 40, hopefully. That would be an ideal number. So with that part of the story that you have advanced, you are going to find the internal structure of narrative sequence until the part that you have read. Probably if you read more, you could complement this later. But for now, only until the part that you have read. So you are going to find the temporality of the story. When does it happen? Is it at an explicit date or you have to guess it? The theme unity, so you're going to check the characters in there. You're going to find the transformation. What are the changes that may be having the story in here? What is the action unity until the moment? In how many parts you can divide the story? In which moments can you give the detail? And finally, the causality. Why? Remember, effect, consequence. The main character did this, so the consequence was this. Let's imagine that it was Alice in Wonderland. So Alice was pursuing the rabbit, the white rabbit. That was the cause. And what was the consequence? She fell into a hole. Right? That's it. Remember that for the causality, you have to write 3-4 moments. That will be more than enough. Okay? We're going to do this individually, as usually, because this is about the books that you're reading. So in this case, we're going to do it in this way. And that's it. Remember, if you have any question, any other assistance that you require from me, just let me know, and I will be more than happy to be available for you. Okay? So thanks a lot for the attention. See you then on the next video that is quite short and in which we're going to talk a little bit about the types of narrators. Okay? Thank you very much. Hugs.